Thank goodness for Sarah. So she'll bail me out if I get stuck anywhere. So high five to you guys for being here today. I'm going to switch it over to share my screen and see if we can get it going here. There we go. So in thinking about negotiation and where to start with this, when Sarah came to me and asked if I'd be interested in doing this, my first response was, yeah, that's awesome. I wanted to create new content anyway. And then as soon as I got off the phone with her, my second response was, oh my God, but I failed at negotiating. I can't do this, right? So the first thing I want to say is that we have all succeeded and we've all failed at negotiating, and we will continue to do that, right? So it's an ongoing thing, and there's some different key elements to why we're doing that. Oh, and Sarah, here's my first, it won't switch. Oh, okay, now it did.
Advance, okay.
So let's do the definition, right? It's a give and take decision-making process involving two or more people with different preferences, right? We all know that. We all pretty much get the gist of negotiating, except that it's a lot harder than that because we have so many different variables throughout that definition. So today, in trying to piece this out to you, because again, part of my anxiety with doing this was what to give you that you could take and use today, but not be too in the weeds because we only have like 45 minutes, but also be impactful, right? So as we go through here today, we're going to talk around kind of the beginning and how we start negotiating, the emotions around that, your code of conduct, which we're going to get into a little bit, and then the actual process of negotiating. And through this, when there is something that jumps out at you, I want you to write it down. Something that you feel like you can take away today or put into practice, or maybe have questions on, or just are intrigued about but maybe don't quite get. Anything that jumps out at you, I'd like you to write it down, and then at the end we can chat around that as well. So again, you know, negotiating and classes on negotiating are weeks long, so we're going to just hit the surface here, but hopefully some things to get your mind a little bit more at ease around how to negotiate. So the world is a stage of negotiation, right? So everything is a negotiated platform that we can kind of bounce off of. So we have family and personal that we're constantly engaging in with that. What should we have for dinner? You know, if your homework's done, then you can go on a bike ride. Can I borrow the car? Friends, right? When can we meet for a Zoom happy hour? We're constantly negotiating some sort of platform. Business is the same way. Right, we're needing a raise, or we want to ask for one. There may be cutting hours, or how to ask for overtime if we're doing business to business, how to get those contracts in place. So we're constantly in that wheel, and it's filled with negotiation, right? So our family, our boss, our clients, our friends, our coworkers are constantly doing this. So we're also doing this with people that we're never going to see again. For an example, if we come to a four-way stop and that car ahead of me stopped before me, then they have the right of way to go, right? But we have all encountered some people will wave you on to go, right? That's a negotiation between the two of you. That is negotiating happening. And things come up within that. So I don't know about you, but I'm triggered when people do that to be annoyed immediately because they're not following a rule, or because it'd be a lot easier if they just followed the rule and just moved, right? And then I went after them. But they're trying to be nice. So there's constantly those things that we are running up against within people. And it started at the beginning of time, right? So our ability to negotiate has been embedded since we were born. So if you think back to when you were growing up and you had a play date and you were taught to share or play nice, how many of us has in the past not wanted to play nice or didn't want to share? So when we were young, what did we do? We threw a tantrum, right? We're like, we're not doing that. This is how we were negotiating with our parents or with our friend at the time of, that's not yours, it's mine. I'm gonna cry, I'm gonna throw a tantrum, I might hit. I apparently was a biter. So I would bite to get what I wanted. The story goes with my mom that she picked me up from daycare one day. The daycare lady told her I bit. We had this argument, and my mom bit me back. So I never bit again. Probably not something that parents do today, but you know, at the time it worked, so whatever. But this goes to show you that we have constantly negotiated through time, right? And we negotiate through emotion. So this is such a huge one, right? The definition is this big long thing there at the bottom where the biological states, you know, associated with nervous system brought on by neurophysiological changes, various associated with thoughts, feelings, behavioral response, degree of pleasure and displeasure. That is a heavy definition of emotions. But what it is integrated with how we negotiate, right? So we need to be mindful, really mindful, and have a good mindset on our emotions to be successful in how we negotiate. It affects every single way that we negotiate. So we have anger that comes up, we have anxiety that comes up, excitement, right? Maybe we're negotiating to get something we really want. We're excited about a new venture with a client, or we're negotiating for a new car or house or something like that, right? We're excited about those things. But what happens is we submit those feelings subconsciously. So interestingly enough, if you think around our personal side and how we negotiate with family and friends, it's very emotionally driven, right? So if anybody's been in or seen movies on group therapy or couples counseling, we learn quickly to say things like, I hear you saying, right? So if you hear that, you know somebody's been in counseling or they've watched movies on that. But you know that what they're doing then is a trigger effect to create non-emotional stances, right, in negotiating. So when we're talking with our friends and family and we learn to do it that way, we're taking that emotion out of it. It's hard to do. So a lot of times we're arguing with our kids or our husband or our wife, something, it's emotionally charged. The key and the effect here is that we are not trained then in the business element to take that emotion out, right? So when we're negotiating a business, that emotion is still present in there. So let's talk around how we squash that a bit. So to manage our emotions, you smile. It's the first easiest way to do that for yourself and to let the guard down of other people. Body language, ours and theirs. Some of you that have been on my classes before have been through some of the body language stuff. We're going to touch on that a little bit here, not too much. Keeping their needs in mind. So this is a sales tactic too, and sales and negotiation are very much the same thing, right? So if we keep their needs in mind and not focus on ours so much, that helps with that anxiety and that anxiousness that comes with wanting to negotiate something, okay? Gratitude is the same way. It's really hard to keep the space of gratitude in the same space as anxiety or fear, right? It kind of puts that out. And then your code of conduct, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. So since everyone's muted, I'm going to answer this for you. The percentage of our communication that's nonverbal is 60%. It's up to 92%. And my guess would be that if you all answered that, you would have gotten it right. I've never had a training or a class where somebody didn't say the correct percentage. But here's the deal. We know it because we've heard it, but we don't put it into action, right? So if we can put some of our nonverbal communication into action, it's going to trigger a more positive emotional response from the person that we're negotiating with. And it's also going to limit our emotional response that we're giving out, okay? It's really important. So let's talk about first impression and the moment someone sees you, okay? There was a study done where they had a group of people watch an interview process done, where they watched the person walk in, do the full interview, and walk back out, 20 minutes. They had another set of group of people that watched the same thing, but only for 20 seconds and cut it off. So there was nothing verbal happening, they just walked into the room. Not surprisingly, since we're talking about body language here, each group rated warmth, competence, and confidence the same in each person, even though they only saw the 20 seconds on this side versus the full 20 minutes on this side. So you have 20 seconds to really make an impact, that first impression to really make an impact as you are negotiating, right? So you have so many things that you can be doing without saying a word to calm the room, right? To really take that power over and that command over. One of those things is your power posing, okay? I say this all the time, but I have yet to have somebody walk into the room like this. I might have Sarah do that one day on a training or something, but it's an awesome thing to do, right? And we can do it prior to a meeting, so we don't have people watching us be awkward. But you can do that, or if you guys right now put your hands on your hips and feel the difference of what just happened to you, right? You sat up straighter, your shoulders are back and down now, you're open for open conversation, and you're stronger, right? So it calms that territory, it calms that anxiety that's going on. There's a really good book out there by Amy Reczek called Presence. So in your downtime right now, if you are a reader, that's a really good one to show you some of the different methods and ways to combat your anxiety and your fear and all those things through body language. She actually is someone who had a massive head trauma happen to her and came back through that through all of her nonverbal communication, because it took her a while to even learn how to speak again. Really phenomenal book. So if you're interested in that. So the other thing that we can do is parts of the body that really stand out to people subconsciously. So again, I'm going to answer this for you. The very first thing that anybody notices is our hands. A lot of times, and this one I don't ever get right. Nobody gets it right. A lot of times we think eyes or hair or clothing, something to that, smile, those types of things. This is a subconscious thing that we do. It is embedded in us from caveman days. So when we are looking at someone, we are subconsciously saying, do I trust them? Are they okay? Are they an enemy or are they a friend, right? And the way we used to do that was that people would come up to us with a weapon in our hand. So then they were not a friend, they were a foe, right? Or if they had open arms, open hands, they were a friend. So we can use this today to, again, calm all that energy, make a really positive vibe and area that we can work with those people that we're negotiating with. So the way we do this is visible and expressive, right? So above the desk, usually when we're negotiating with people, we're at a table. So one of the things that we can do is have them on the desk or on the table. I will tell you, I have a hard time with this. I don't know why, but I want to put them in my lap. So if you are a person that really doesn't like them on the table, you can move your chair back a little bit and put them in your lap so they're visible. Or if they're on the table and you have problems with just sneaking them back into your lap so they can't see, use a stabilizer. I use things like pens, a cup, those types of things to keep me grounded so I'm not worried about where my hands are and I can keep focus on the meeting. Okay, but that's a little trick. If we're standing, avoid pockets, make sure that they can be seen. And handshakes. So handshakes are important for a couple reasons, right? We want a good handshake, so vertical, right? Not this way, this is a dominant move, not the kind of wet fish, dead fish handshake. If you are one of those people, work on your handshake. We cannot tell somebody else, well, unless you're a good friend maybe, but we usually can't tell somebody else that their handshake sucks. So the thing that we need to do is make sure that ours is great, right? Handshakes are awesome because they're also incorporating touch. So we have the hand for the trust factors, right? And negotiating and what we want out of this, we're wanting to make sure that person is trusting us. But we also are touching them with the handshake. So what that does is it releases oxytocin. So actually a handshake is worth 3 hours of face time. So keep that in mind when you're working on those things. And maybe now it's an elbow bump, right? But the thing is that it's still a touch. So any way that we touch, we are giving off, releasing that, and creating that energy. So I put comfort gestures in here because there are a lot of nerves that go on with negotiating, right? So nervous body language cues. So we rub our arms, wringing of our hands, cracking knuckles, we bite our tongue or lip. Women, we are really good at preening, right? So picking at our nails or messing with our hair, right? Those are things that we do that are nervous body tics. When I was creating this, one of the things that was stressful for me was how do I put in here content that's valuable for you guys, but again, not so heavy because there's so much that goes on with negotiating. And I noticed when I got to this slide and I was working on this that my leg was shaking. So I was inadvertently, subconsciously, doing nervous body language cues while I was working on the nervous body language cue slide. right? So we all have them if we're just very aware of how we do that. The flip side of that is being really aware of who you're negotiating with. Maybe they're nervous, maybe they're anxious, those things are going on. These are really great cues for you to ask those pertinent questions, right? Is this settling okay with you? How is this making you feel? Those are really good questions when you're seeing stuff like this go on with that person that you're talking with. And negative. So this is another one to keep in mind. If it's flipped and you're not kind of the lead of the negotiating, right? And they're negotiating and you want something and they say something to you that turns it off, right? You're not excited about this anymore. You might have been leaning forward, engaged in the conversation, and now immediately what happens? You lean back and your arms are crossed. How many of us have done that in a personal setting when you're talking to a family member or something where the energy's charged in the room and immediately they say something that sets you off and that's the first thing you do? I know that's what I do, is I cross my arms and I step back in my chair, right? What signal does that give off, right? That gives off, I'm angry, mad, I don't want to talk to you anymore. It's done, right? So really making sure that you watch those cues when you're talking through the negotiation and making sure that you are not giving off those cues as well. Okay. Triple head nod. So this is the last one on body language. And I put this in here because we all kind of universally do this because it shows empathy and it shows engagement. This is really important when we're negotiating. We want to make sure it's a win-win, that we're doing this together. It's not a me versus you type of thing. So when that other person is talking, we want to lean forward, engage in them. You know, if they're talking, oh, that's really interesting. Keep going. Tell me more, right? So your head is tilted a little bit and you're doing that little slow nod, okay? If that is something that doesn't come natural to you, practice it in a mirror first because we don't want to be bobblehead, right? We don't want to be awkward, although it might get some really good conversation going. But just be aware that you might have a little oddness in that. But usually people do that pretty easily, okay? So we talked about the nonverbal stuff and what goes on with that. So let's talk about preparing our emotional state because this is a key element to making sure that negotiation goes well, okay? And there's three.
Amy, do we want to see if people have questions before you move on?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay. I know we covered a lot. If you have questions, just unmute yourself and say, hey, Amy, and give us your question.
So is the key, like a lot, just the energy that you give off? Is that like something you just want to be aware of, like your energy and their energy?
Absolutely, 100% of the time. So anytime that we are walking into a room, whether we're negotiating or we're in a sales meeting or presenting, however we do that, we want to make sure that our mindset is ready and that mindset overflows to our nonverbal, right? What we're giving off and how we're approaching that. So a lot of times negotiation, it's so emotionally charged that a lot of times we are already giving that off when we walk in, right? How many times have you walked into a group setting where you came alone, you might know people there, but you come alone, you have immediately that kind of nervous, anxious energy until you talk to someone, right? Or until you kind of get in there. That's you. A lot of times we show that non-verbally if we're not mentally checked at the door to really be aware of that.
This is good just to like ground, just ground yourself. Remind yourself, like, maybe it was like a key word sometimes if sometimes it's hard to remember.
Hey, Amy, I have a question. Are you going to get into some negotiations that might take place over the phone? So there's no body language that you can see or put out there?
So I'm not going to get into actual examples today, but to answer your question on phone, you can't see it, but you can hear it.
Okay.
So the things that you can do is you still want to prep yourself non-verbally before you ever get on a phone. If I am doing phone calls, especially sales phone calls, or having things that are kind of emotionally charged like that, I will stand up during those calls. So I have, the stand-up desk thing that I do to make sure that I am prepared non-verbally. The other thing that you can do with voice, because a lot of times if we get kind of anxious within our voice, it tends to go up a little bit in pitch, right? So what we can do with that to ground that is to take a deep breath in. And then on the exit, when you are exhaling is when you want to speak. And you can practice that before you do a call. That will give you your actual baseline pitch on your voice, so you're not ramping that up.
Thank you.
Okay, keep
Go
going.
ahead, Amy.
Okay, so let's talk around getting into that emotional state and grounding that a little bit, right? So there's 3 different things that are going to happen. The build up before the meeting, the main event, which is the meeting, and then the final, which is you come to the agreement, all those things. So this prep work is done before you are ever face-to-face with anybody. So you're doing this privately, just like you would prep a meeting, and you're prepping everything that you're going to want to say and all the options and the value add and all those things that we are taught to do. You're going to want to put this into place too, to just check your emotions at the door a little bit, right? Doesn't have to be long and drawn out, just something to check in with yourself. So the first one, the buildup, how do I feel? So back to an example of this, when Sarah and I were negotiating, okay, is this something that you'd be up for doing? Immediately, I checked myself, how do I feel? I'm anxious about this. Okay, why are you anxious about this? Write it down. I'm anxious about this because it's a heavy topic. It's a big one. How do I give value to the people listening within this short amount of time? I'm anxious because I haven't prepped it yet, right? I need to prep it and make sure that that's the way I want it and the way I want it to flow. So those types of things I'm checking at the beginning, right? Knowledge around clients and needs. So the knowledge is not necessarily around the product. You're going to have that, right? But the knowledge is also about the client. So why are they coming to you? If it's something that you are offering that they have already, or that someone else is offering down the street, then why are they coming to you? Know that value add. Boundaries. So the boundaries between them and you, know your worth. This is a hard one, especially when we are the ones coming to the table with the offer. It's hard to know your worth and your value. So we're going to talk around that with the in just a second here. So just know those things, prep those a little bit, write them out. Your main event. So now prep around, okay, if I'm to visualize this meeting and scenarios that might go on, what might they ask me that would make me anxious, angry, or excited? Again, prep work is key here, right? So we want to prepare for some things that they might ask that might trigger us. So they might be quick to the ball to say, yeah, I don't have a lot of time today, so just tell me what your price is. What are you going to do with that? That's a scenario, right? Have that in mind so you can go through and say, if this, then this, okay? We can't buffer ourselves completely because we don't know those people and how they're going to act or how their day is going right now, right? But we can at least prep ourselves to make sure that we're ready and prepared as much as we can be. What might I do to trigger their emotions, right? So if there's something that I say that's off-putting, be aware of that. Make sure that I can come around again and say some things to adversely affect that, right? So if I do something or if I say something that's a little too quick on the ball and I see a reaction from them, then I need to be very aware and prepped to say, did I jump the gun there? Or should we talk a little bit more around that? Tell me how you're feeling on that, okay? So prepare to answer those tough questions. So again, today we're not going to dive deep into, if then this scenarios or questions, but what I am going to do is send you guys the code of conduct sample that we're going to talk about next. And then I'm also going to send you some good prepared questions and answers as well, okay? Or Sarah will send those to you. So, and then finally, list of possible outcomes, right? So what do you expect for an outcome? And what do you hope for an outcome, right? So those are somewhat two different things. So what I want to do at every single meeting is my expectation, what I expect is to at least come away with another meeting, okay? My hope would be that we would come away with another meeting and maybe an agreement in place, right? And then that other meeting is to set that agreement and sign. But that's really kind of my agenda. That's my hope and my expectations. How do those outcomes make me feel? What happens if they say not right now? Okay. To me, a not right now is, or no is just not right now. So that's okay for me, right? I have put in my mindset that that's an okay thing. And then how do I create value? So how do I make sure that I'm through this whole process creating value? So those are just some things you can manipulate this and do this however you want to. You can list out those questions on the build-up, the main event, and the final that are pertinent to you and how you feel you resonate with. But this is an example to kind of set that emotional side, so then you can actually get into the stuff you're needing to do. So your code of conduct. Okay, so now this is where I'm going to share again. Oh, hold on. Okay. Good. Sarah, can you see that? Okay, good. So code of conduct, this is my sales code of conduct for my company. And again, I'm going to send this to you guys in a Word doc, so you can create this how you want to. But this is really your do or die, right? This is who you are, who your company is, what makes you great on this, okay? So you can create this however you want to. These are just some of mine. So always treat potential customers with courtesy and respect, right? Transparent and be authentic. That is a core value of mine, is to be transparent and authentic. If I'm having a crap day, you're gonna know it because I'm just gonna tell you, okay? Those are things that are really real for me. Understand the potential customer situation. So knowing the customer inside and out, and this means beyond what they do and what they offer. This means who they are. So if I'm sitting in front of somebody and I'm gonna be talking to them, I wanna know who they are as a person. That's something that is really important to me, okay? Create accurate proposals, sign each agreement, invest in a mutual benefit. So something that's not, again, just here's my product, I want you to buy it, but how am I helping you? How am I bringing value? So the other one to me too that's really interesting and really important to me is value on multiple avenues. So value to me is not just dollar. So a couple things here. I will lower price if I have things like new content that I'm bringing out, right? Or if I'm working with a client and they want me to work with their sales team in a different way that I have done before, I will lower, because what I'm doing is also gaining value for myself in content that I'm going to be able to use again, right? So those are things that are okay for me. Those are my hard lines, right? So and then some non-negotiables are, if I've done it before, then this is my cost, right? And I'm not going to go below a certain line. So knowing your non-negotiables, knowing who you are, knowing your core, knowing your value and your worth helps with knowing how to negotiate. So here's an example of this. I had a friend of mine about a month ago who is in the title world, title insurance for housing. And there was a company here locally that was a competitor. She's a manager, and the competitor got purchased and they shut the Colorado doors overnight. So she, of course, then had people coming to her wanting to get hired, right? And she did have some openings, so it was fine. It was a great time to do that. She had one person who she wanted to hire. So they had this conversation, they had a negotiation on when she could come on board, right? Because negotiation isn't just dollar, but it's process. So when she could come on board, what she would be doing, what her territory is, all those things, including salary. The lady got back to her and did not know her own worth. So what happened, because she didn't have this kind of code of conduct in her mind of like, this is who I am and this is my worth and this is my bottom line, what happened was she said, well, everything sounds really great. It's a little less than what I was making before. So she was wishy-washy, right? And a couple things happening here. So she didn't have the code of conduct and she was emotionally charged because she just got let go, right? So she needed a job. She was a little bit nervous and scared. She felt like she owed it all of a sudden to this person that potentially is hiring her. And she completely forgot about the 20 years prior that she'd been doing this job and her worth and her value that she brought to the table, okay? So cool kind of scenario on this is that the manager actually said to her, I need you to counter me, okay? So that doesn't happen very often. Usually they'll be happy with, lowballing and taking you that way. So just be very aware of your value and your worth, and this code of conduct helps that, okay? Also know that when you're negotiating things like salary, there's always room to negotiate. Very, very rarely is a company gonna come to you with their max amount, right? There's always room to negotiate on some level. And then if there's not, if they come back to you and say, you know, I'm sorry, this is exactly what we need that we can offer, at least then you know that's still a negotiation, right? So just know your worth. So that's what this is, that code of conduct. And again, Sarah's going to email this out to you. Okay, so let me flip it back here. I don't know how. Okay. Okay, so that's what that is. So the emotional side of things, right? We listed everything out kind of scenario wise. We have our code of conduct in place. We have our nonverbal stuff. So all that kind of heavy lifting on the front end is done. Okay. Now it's not gonna. Okay. So let's talk about process. Process is heavy, right? There's so many different variables because you have collective behaviors that are involving marketing, communication, psychology, assertiveness, conflict resolution, right? And you never kind of know where you're going to go. So prepping all that stuff ahead of time is going to help you. This is a very basic baseline of negotiation process, okay? So prepare, that's number one. Know who you're talking to. Why do they want to meet with you? Again, check yourself at the door. Why is it you that they're talking to and not your neighbor that does the same thing? Okay, what value add are you bringing? Discussion, discussion, discussion. The more you know, the better you're going to be at this, right? So learning their objectives, learning their structure, learning what they're wanting, asking outright, tell me your best scenario. What would you want out of what I have to offer, right? Clear goals. So those goals and interests then are going to be created. List them out and list them out prior of what your goals and interests are hoping to do with this negotiation. And then when you're in the meeting, see if they match. List them out with them as well, okay? Clear goals, clear, clear, clear. Win-win. So both sides feel like they are coming to the table. So we don't want, obviously, I call it the old used car salesman tactic, right? So buy now, buy now. We want to make sure that we're both in this together and we're both winning. I have an example of this a few years ago since I'm talking about cars. I went to buy a car and I had my non-negotiable set for some reason, because I usually don't. I'm definitely an emotional impulse buyer. But that day I had down to two cars, same exact vehicle, two different lots. So we went and test drove the first one, and I was very clear with the person, and I said, we're going to go to this other place, test drive another one, and I will let you know. He did the buy now. So his negotiation tactic was on emotion, right? How many times have you been to a car lot where they don't use an emotion tactic on negotiation, right? And his comment was, well, I can offer you this right now if you don't leave the lot, but you can't leave the car lot, and it won't be yours still. So I left because that was part of my non-negotiable, was that I had to test drive the other one, right? So I went and test drove the other one, liked the first one better, came back. Of course it wasn't off the table because they needed to sell the car, right? So then his negotiation tactics changed a little bit in that, okay, well, yeah, we'll still work with you. But then here's the price set. Again, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, kind of where your line is, your bottom line and your top line of which you're going to pay or come to agreement with. And we're not really hitting it. The other thing that was happening was that every time we come up with a number, he would get up and go talk to the guy behind the curtain, right? So I felt like it was an Oz where he had to go get an okay from someone and come back. So I ended up saying, I don't know who you're going to talk to, but I clearly am not needing to talk to you. So that was my bottom line then, and said, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I need to talk to the actual decision maker, right? So your bottom lines can change a little bit while you're in that negotiation, depending on what's happening there. This is a really broad and interesting one because I don't know, car lots are kind of a really interesting area for me anyway, just because they're so odd. But the guy came and negotiated with me, and it was fine. And it ended up being great. He was awesome. The first guy, emotionally got me angry, right? So because his tactics were to use my emotions. Well, it backfired because it wasn't my need of purchase emotion, it was my anger, right? So making sure that you have a win-win drive there. Agreement, so once you have that, then it's obviously onto an agreement stage. Negotiation has been met. I do like, depending on how you're doing a negotiation, I will actually set another meeting on purpose. So if you have something where it just flies through and everybody's in agreement, it's awesome. I don't know how many times that happens, but let's say it does, right? Everybody's on the same page, everybody's excited about it. I still will take a halt there and say, okay, perfect. So let's reconvene here in 2 days or so, and I'm gonna put a recap together with everything that we have here, put an agreement in place, that kind of thing, right? Give it a minute to breathe, because things might come up that you aren't seeing within that negotiation hour, okay? And then action items, which would be the follow-up and the signed agreement, okay? So this is your baseline process of how negotiation goes. And here's some fun, really horrible words. I don't know who invented these and what they stand for. They crack me up, but they work. So 3 terms to help you negotiate successfully here. BATNA, which stands for Best Alternative to the Negotiated Agreement, right? So what would you do if they were not able to come to what you wanted? Reservation value, so the least favorable point at which you will accept that negotiation, right? So for example, for the seller, this means the minimum amount that they would take for what they're selling. And for the buyer, it's the max amount that they would take, right? Or spend on that. That's your reservation value. And then in the middle is your sweet spot, which is your zone of possible agreement, or your ZOPA. I was telling Sarah earlier, I have to always say it like ZOPA because I was raised by a stepmom who was Greek. And so we always had like the birthdays where they smash the plates and whoopah. So it sounds like that to me. So that's a good way to remember it, is this Greek fun thing. But it's that sweet spot where everyone's coming together in agreement, right? So here is a visual on this for you. Okay, so if we say best alternative to negotiation agreement, right, BATNA, which is not always a number, let's keep that in mind. That is, so your buyer's settlement range between the 0 and the 4,500. And for your seller, it's the 5,000 to 7,000, right? Okay. So what's happening there too is, if you think about that, your best alternative to that is going to be, okay, well, if I can't get what I really, really want, right, then I can maybe start with my bottom line, but it can also be added value. So going back to my comment earlier of, I might say my price is lower if I can get the value of teaching the class, right? Or being hands-on. Those are other value things that aren't dollar amount, okay? Your reservation value is always a number, and that's that number right in between there on ZOPA. So it's that low line there, that 4,500, and then that 5, okay? That's your reservation number, okay? So that is also called, to me, called your do or die, or your non-negotiated, right? So that's kind of that bottom line that people will go to, and then you won't go any lower. So if I am a seller, right, and my bottom line, I really love to get 7,000, but the lowest I will go is at 4,500. That's my reservation value line, okay, or my non-negotiable line. So if it's anything below 45, then I know I'm going to walk away, okay? Have these numbers in mind when you are talking to people. This will help you. I can't tell you how many times when I started my company, the first couple months, someone would randomly ask me, so how much do you charge? And I'd be like, oh shit, I don't know, right? Because I didn't have these numbers in line. I didn't have my do or die number and this is kind of what I feel like I'm worth number and what I'd love to get, right? But this is my kind of do or die line. Same thing for a buyer, right? So obviously they take something for free, but then their max that they're going to spend, their breaking point is at 5,000. They're not going to go over that. That's the reservation line. Now that ZOPA in between, again, is your sweet spot. So that's the spot that you want to come to agreement on. So hopefully when you're negotiating and you're talking, that's what you can drum up with all these questions and trying to figure out what they're wanting, right? So collect all the information you can from open sources, from experts you know. That helps you. So if you're offering a service that other people are offering, figure out how much they're charging. Are you in line? Are you way out of line, right? On the basis of information you collected, make your preliminary assumptions. So what are they paying today? Ask, if you're okay with it, ask them, right? If you have a good relationship with those people, ask them outright. Would you be willing to share with me what you're paying today? Okay, see if it's in line. with what's going on with what you're wanting to talk about. And then test and adjust your assumptions during the negotiation round, right? So while you are in those negotiations, test it out, make sure that those things are in line. If that person is like, well, we can't spend any more than this. Okay, so maybe ask them some questions around this. Tell me what your feelings are around that and what your expectations of what you're getting are with that dollar amount, right? Because what your dollar amount that you might have in your head also has the value of this, and this. Theirs might have just this value, right? This is all we're wanting right now. So then in that negotiation stage, you're going to learn, okay, I need to come back down here, right? That's all that prep that you've done prior to make sure that you're ready for this. This visual is a really good thing to have in mind when you are working with people or talking to someone, just to keep in mind with your own balance and the visual of where you want to kind of end up. Yeah. And if you want this slide, I can send this to you too. So with the process side of things, your preparation is key. Again, we can go on and on and on with different scenarios and things like that, totally different class. But what we can do is know yourself, know who you represent, be ready for it, define the interests and the outcome, right? So making sure that you have all of that prepped. Set realistic expectations. Maybe you don't get the client today, but maybe you do in 6 months. Decide your walkaway. So decide that breaking point. That's really, really hard, especially if you're new to something, being okay with walking away from that, right? Or if you're asking for a raise, being okay with not getting what you want right now, or walking away from it and saying you're good at that, okay? Try to predict your ZOPA. That's a hard one, but try to predict that for your, definitely predict it for yourself, but for the person that you're talking with. And then do your research. Research. Okay. So we covered kind of a lot here on a very high level, right? So your emotions, your code of conduct, and your process. So Sarah, do you want me to, we have chat in here. Hold on, I'm gonna stop sharing.
Yes, we do have chat. Sarah was just asking if she can get the ZOPA slide, and I'll make sure everyone gets that. Oh, I turned my camera off. Sorry. I was having cat issues.
Yes, I will definitely send the ZOPA slide as well.
Can I get that last slide too?
With the key?
With the key?
It was a really good visual, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other slides that you guys are wanting? Okay.
Or other questions?
Wait, hold on, you guys. This is Erin. There is another slide I want. I took a picture of it, but I have to go back and see which one it was. So give me 1 second. I'm going to tell you which one it was. It was the negotiation process. I actually liked that slide a lot as well. Would you send that to?
Yes.
Awesome.
Any questions, or did you guys write down, at the beginning where I said, write down some things that jump out at you or things that you might be interested in? Anything that came up for you?
Shelby?
Yeah, I thought it was fascinating because with everything going on right now around the COVID virus, I'm in another group and so many people have been saying that they're so happy right now that handshakes are kind of being done away with. And they're like, finally, like, why isn't this caught on sooner? And so I thought it was fascinating that you said that physical touch relates to and corresponds with is equal to 3 hours of FaceTime, which is fascinating. Because I was kind of like, I'm not personally someone who is bothered touching. I'm actually a very physical touching person. But it was interesting to see people, again, who were so excited, but then hear that other side of it. So I like that a lot.
Is that, just out of curiosity, is there excitement of not shaking hands because they don't like to touch?
Yeah, they just think that it's, especially like in other cultures, they bow or there's just like a respectfulness of other people's personal space. And they just were saying that America's one of the last people or like countries to kind of follow suit with that. And I mean, they're not wrong. And I kind of play it by how, whenever I walk up to someone, if I can read their emotions or not, but you can't always do that. And here the culture, it is to shake hands. So anyways, I just think it's fascinating.
That is fascinating. I wonder about the space issue though, because I don't know about you, but in different cultures, touching is not okay, but like being in somebody's space is.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So
Interesting.
that's an interesting thing to me.
Yeah, I'll look it up and I'll share some more of their thoughts too with you if you want later.
Yeah, it's interesting.
You'll find it interesting. But yeah,
Mhm.
I like that piece particularly.
Amy, it's Christine. What I've done that you talked about in one of your classes at Rise was that I really start my meeting when I shut my car off.
Mhm.
My mind goes right into, it's not when I walk in the door, it's truly as I'm picking up my pocketbook or materials I'm taking with me, that's when I shift my mindset.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And that speaks to that emotion that kicks in, right? When we're going into a meeting and we're ready to negotiate, the more we are in that mindset of being in that meeting and being readily there, the better. And you don't know what you're going to run into either, right? So I always say, start your meeting in your car, in your mind. Your meeting is already started, already set. So no matter who you're running into, no matter who you're speaking with, you're already in that mindset already. The other thing that it does is that it helps you non-verbally, right? So if you're prepping non-verbally that way, then you are already in your meeting non-verbally. You shift differently, you stand differently. How many meetings have we walked into where when we start our meeting in our mind is when we've already, so we walk into the room, we get coffee, we might say hi to people, we sit down, we get situated, we get our stuff out, our notebook out, and then the meeting starts for you, right? Think of that, all of that time in between that you could have made an impact on the people around you if you were actually in the meeting in your mind prior to that, right? Yeah, Christine, that's great.
I just want to share as well. This is Erin again, and I loved the power stances that you showed. And I think it's inevitably, as we're preparing or going into a meeting, we oftentimes are going to be anxious or nervous or whatever that looks like. And I just love the idea, and I love the visuals of the things you can do to just kind of reset your confidence, so to speak, right? And to just give yourself that presence to be able to go in and do it. And I do think stances and things like that are so important. And I also loved, especially because we are all contained to our homes right now, I loved how you were talking about walking around while you're, or standing up while you are doing a meeting, because it does create a different level of energy in doing that. And I think it's super important now that we're not so much face to face, and it's sometimes harder to read body language, but by just putting that energy out differently is, I thought that was really a good point. And I loved the actual breath piece that you talked about as well, breathing in and then breathing out when you speak. I thought that was really, really good information. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, that breathing one is an interesting technique, especially now that we're all going to be on calls and computers and people aren't going to see us. One of the things that's easier for us to do when there's no visual going on is to slouch, right? Is to do those things, is to maybe not be as present as we normally would if people's eyes were on us. And then our nervousness still kicks in. So with that voice pitch thing, it helps to practice that. I come from theater, so I like to do a lot of things like this, prep like this in front of my bathroom mirror. So I talk to myself a lot in the bathroom, but it's a really good way to watch your mannerisms, watch your facial expressions, watch how you're doing things with your hands. There are amazing things that you'd never know that you do if you do that within that mirror.
I actually think these meetings are kind of doing exactly what you're saying, because like you are some, and like some Hangouts isn't that way. I've done one Hangouts, but most are Zoom, and you are like I feel like I'm more aware than if I was live, just because I'm like, everyone can see.
Well, because you're seeing yourself, right?
Totally.
Exactly right. Because you're seeing, normally if you're in a meeting, you're not seeing yourself.
Right.
So you have this kind of subconscious thing that you don't really know what you're doing, right? You think you do, like you got it handled, but then when you're
now I don't.
doing that, it's a totally different mindset. Yeah.
And so if I can add to what Erin was saying, when I'm on the phone, I often find myself in front of a mirror because I need to visualize and see somebody. And watching myself then really gives me sort of an idea of what I'm doing when I'm not in front of the mirror, when I'm talking to people. And like you said, like I've had my video off for this because to be honest, I'm doing other work and things, but I've gotten a lot out of it. And when I went to turn it back on, I immediately sat up straighter, and was more engaged. So it does make a difference. And I do find, like, even if I'm just talking on the phone, I do need to stand up. I need to move around. Quite often I'm looking at myself as I'm doing it.
Yeah, that's a great tidbit. Anybody who is in inside sales, if they're trained properly in inside sales, they'll have a mirror on their desk at all times when they're calling to visually be aware of what they're doing.
Amy, can you say more about, I loved your technique or your advice on knowing your value, and that could just be asking somebody. I am lucky that, I have a service / product where I can Google what the price of, shared workspace and community memberships are. Like Sarah sells tea, she can figure out what other tea brands are selling. But if you're in the service solopreneur space, are there other ways besides asking somebody to figure out your value?
So value is a lot more than price, right? We know that. So let's say that we start with price, you have a number in mind, and then you want to talk around value add, right? And who you are and what you bring with that value. So a couple ways to do it. One, I would say first, target a few handful of people. Also, you might be a little nervous to ask as well, but ask them to give you feedback on what your value is. One of the best things that came to me last year was that, actually, when someone said, I didn't ask, it wasn't prompted, but then it made me start asking people. Where her comment to me was, your best value add is your energy in the room. She's like, you give this energy, right? So I thought, okay, I work with sales people who have a whole lot of different energy going on, a lot of them, right? But I work with teams like that and companies to really work with their sales team. So part of what I now bring into the negotiation package is you have my energy. You have a different energy set that's coming into your core team, right? So I use that. The other thing that you can do is really start listing some of the things that get you excited. So some of the things that you do as an entrepreneur are in the weeds. Like, part of something that I absolutely cannot stand in my career is creating PowerPoints. I hate them. I absolutely hate them. I love the content, but I hate creating them. It's boring to me. I just don't get it. So I finally have reserved to go to Fiverr and have someone do that for me for like $15, and it's great, and it's so much better. But those are one of those things that sucks my energy, right? So if you can flip that and start writing down the things that get you super excited about what you're doing, that's your value. So some of the content that you do might not be as exciting, but there's certain parts of your content that just light you up. That's part of your value. That's your differentiator.